Well, hello, my couture crafters. Today, I'm so happy to be back and talking about a quilting project. I don't know if it's better to start off with a full-size quilt or if it's better to start off with one of these, which is a mug rug. And basically, it's a tiny quilt. Everything that I do to a quilt, I did to this. It's just tiny. So if you are intimidated about starting with a big quilt, this is definitely an option. I did this for a friend. The ladies that I quilt with over at the Senior Citizen Center, they did a quilt for a lady who was not feeling well, who's not doing well, and I didn't get a chance to participate, so it just never quite sat right with me. And it's not their fault, it's mine. My schedule did not allow, blah 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 blah, and I don't know. So this is going to her, and it has an inspirational scripture right here, and then my all-time favorite quilt block, which is the same as this little green quilt block. It's the card trick. I am out of practice. I've been working on that darn Disney quilt, and it is foundation piecing, and this I straight up pieced. Now, I did not necessarily want to do that. I wanted to quilt as I go. So this pattern is by June Taylor and her inspirational mug mats. She has one that is quilt as you go, and that's the one that I wanted. This one I had to quilt myself, and you guys will see it. This is not my very best work, but it is some of my very best fabric. Good old Kaffe Fassett. I just think it is, oh, I just love Kaffe Fassett. So she's getting my very best fabric, even if some of my corners kind of got cut off, blah, blah, blah. So if you feel really intimidated about starting with a huge quilt, maybe a mug rug is for you, which is basically just a quilt block or an 8x10 block of some sort, some sewing. Go on ahead and keep watching, and I will show you how I made this. Thanks for coming, and if you're not yet, please subscribe. Bye-bye. Okay, we're jumping right in. This is kind of a test to see if I can actually film in my craft room from the proper angle, and it looks like I can. There are some problematic things that happened, but I figured it out. It can be done. So we are cooking with gas as far as going forward with me showing you guys my quilting journey. So this is a June Taylor pattern, like I said before, and right now I'm just cutting out the pieces to actually assemble the quilt blocks. So it requires that I cut out one at like 2 7/8. And if you're intimidated by that, there is a video on my channel that talks about how to use a ruler and not be scared of the 7/8, 5/8, that kind of thing, because it can be intimidating. I think I'm going to do another video that talks specifically about these creative grid rulers and the markings on them, because there are a lot of lines. But like I said, at this point, I am just cutting out the pieces for the blocks. There are several blocks and patterns in this little kit here. Well, it's not really a kit. It's just the pattern and then the little scriptures. So there's several. See that one at the top right? That one's super easy. It's simply just straight lines, and that might be a really good one to start with. The one that I started with is probably the most difficult one. Yeah, definitely the most difficult one that I see on here. So if you just, I don't know if I should encourage you to just start a big quilt or start here. When I think about starting a big quilt, I kind of think about it in terms of learning to drive a stick before you learn to drive an automatic, and there's some good to that. So I don't know. But if you are intimidated and you're like, no way, I'm not doing a big quilt, maybe you would like to try this. So what I did was I cut out all the little pieces. It tells you what pieces to cut, and it's kind of got like a little color code there. If I were doing this again, I'd probably do that busy as the light blue and then solids as the other part. So I cut them all out, and I'm doing something here called using a leader. And so it's just a scrap piece of fabric. And for whatever reason, when you are sewing corners like this little triangle, the sewing machine will just eat it up or get tangled up. But if you use that little leader, Usually it just goes smoothly. I don't know why. It's like your sewing machine is already warmed up. So I chain pieced these triangles one after another, and then I'm using this little tip to check to see if I sewed a 1/4 inch, and I did. So now you see all those little dog ears? That's what happens when you sew triangles. You get what they call dog ears. And now I'm just trimming or squaring up my block. So each one of these little blocks should be 2.5 inches, and they are. At this point, I was sewing pretty good. It went a little wonky after a while, but right here it was pretty good. So then I sewed all of them together, sewed the rows, and then I sewed I sewed the columns. How did I do it? No, I sewed the rows, and then I sewed the rows to the rows. And I'm pressing them in between. So you sew, then you press, then you sew, then you press. And right now I am sewing the scripture to the rest of the block. And at this point, it's looking really good and promising. And then it dawned on me, oh shoot, I have to actually quilt this, which means, remember, it's when you take the needle through the whole sandwich. There's another way of doing this, and I think I ordered them. So tomorrow I should have the other pattern, and I'll show you guys how I work with that, because this was more work than I wanted it to be for what I was trying to do. This, I actually had to make a whole little quilt. So I'm cutting out the batting, and I'm choosing what backing fabric. I almost used that woody fabric, but I was like, stop hoarding fabric. Do the right thing. Use the cape on the back. This is some very nice, expensive fabric right here, guys. This is Kafe Facet. It's Kaffe. And he makes stuff that I just adore and love. So I should have spray basted or glue basted or pin basted, which means sticking this all together. But I didn't. Again, just doing stupid stuff. And this is when it went left. This is when it all went left. So when I quilt, usually I will draw out the lines, and sometimes I do some serious quilting. It's always straight line quilting, but it'll be intricate and sometimes echoing the shapes. And what I should have done are some diamonds in that purple area, but I was really trying to get through this project. I was, it's definitely made with love, but I needed to move swiftly through it. So I decided to stitch in the ditch on this. And all that means is I followed the lines with the needle. And now after I finished that, I was going to have to bind it. Again, the quilt as you go binding method is so much easier. I'm going to show you guys. I hope I ordered it so that I can show you guys how to quilt as you go for this particular pattern. So for the binding, I folded the 2.5 inch strip in half, ironed it, and then I created a little pocket for it. And that's how I'm going to finish binding this sucker up. I'm putting the raw edges together. You see the pink edges are on the outside. And then I just sew through. And I know this is a super fast tutorial for a beginner. And again, this quilt block really isn't probably what I would consider a beginner quilt block. But it's a pretty cool place to start. So the way you bind, I do the same thing for a big quilt, is I sew diagonally off the side, and then I come back down after I have made that little fold up there so that I have some nice mitered corners. Do not use a ruler like I just did, because your sewing machine is trying to get over a hump, because this is a pretty thick sandwich at this point. Use some extra fabric or a nail file, something softer, because I had a little oopsie here. I don't show it on camera, but I politely sewed right through an acrylic ruler. Didn't even know I could do that. I put that brand new needle in there and it went straight through the ruler. So don't use the ruler back there, guys. Use some extra fabric. Like right, you see what I'm doing? Don't do that. Use extra fabric behind it to help it get over the hump. And so this is me actually sewing in real time. And we're just going to go all the way to the end. Now this is the very end. And I'm going to tuck this tail. I didn't cut it short enough at first. I have to go back and cut it again. But I tucked that tail into that little pocket. Isn't that cool? I like this way of binding better than the other ways. The other ways are just a little more complicated for no reason. And you know there's got to be a start and a stop. There are some people who try to make it so that it's seamless, but it's just not that serious to me. Sometimes I do it a different way, but lately I've been going to this because it's just faster and a little easier. So now I'm just going to sew from the top all the way over, all the way down, past where I started sewing. And then I just roll it over, and I stitched in the ditch, and I was able to catch it on the back. So I put a little glue down in that hole just to secure it. And now I'm just flipping these corners inside out so that you have a nice miter there. And I should have pressed this, but I didn't. Again, going super fast. I just rolled it over and used some Wonder Clips here. And I'm just clipping the binding to the little quilt, making sure that it's covering the back. And here's where I stitched in the ditch to finish it. So you just kind of open the fabric up a little bit, and then I have an open toe foot so I can see where I'm going. And then I just stitched in that ditch all the way around. Now we're back where I am super comfortable filming, and I decided to use my little Cricut Joy, which is that little machine to the left, to cut out just a little sentiment saying wishing you well and my name for the back of the quilt. Because again, I've told you guys, label your quilts, label the stuff. Isn't that flower just beautiful? Oh. And I used my little Cricut mini iron to heat it up, and it actually worked pretty well. It would have worked better with my bigger one, but I didn't feel like taking the bigger one out. I just wanted to use this little guy. So you just kind of move it around and preheat the fabric for 5 seconds, and then wait for it to cool, and then just peel it off. And that is a mug rug. Again, I'm going to do another one with the Quilt As You Go, which really is a little bit more beginner friendly. If you haven't subscribed, please do so, and I will see you on the next video. Bye-bye.